This presentation is to inform club members and to educate newer Rotarians about one of the major worldwide roles that Rotary plays. This is the first in a series of talks that are to inform members about things beyond the confines of the Rotary Club of Adelaide. All right? And the Rotary Foundation is a big operation. The first speaker today will be our District 9500, past District Governor Ed King. Now, I'll tell you a bit about Ed. You've probably read a little in the bulletin, but still. Ed was born in immediate post-war London and moved with his parents to Cape Town in South Africa, a beautiful city where he lived for some 27 years. So, essentially, in lots of ways, he's a Yapi or a South African. And that's good. Rob Bowker would support that, I think.
I do.
Have I got a seconder? No. In 1964-65, Ed spent 1 year as an exchange student in Maine in the USA, and in 1968 commenced work in the insurance industry. In 1974, he accepted a transfer with his employer in South Africa to move to their Australian office in Melbourne. So he's lived there for a while and he knows what rain's all about. He then joined Apex, and during that time he was awarded a life membership of Apex. So this guy has a heart for community service. The family grew to 2 daughters and a son, and Ed was soon promoted to the state manager for South Australia in his company, and he remained, this is very unusual, he remained with the same company nearly all his working life and retired with the same organisation in insurance in 2008. Now, how many guys in the room have been with the same organisation all their lives? 1, 1.5, 2, 3, 4. Good, a minority. Now, in terms of his experience in Rotary, Ed began his Rotary life with the Rotary Club of Adelaide, which he joined in 1986. He then leaves a bit out and tells me that he went to Kidman Park. I'm not going to ask him why he left Adelaide, but he might like to elaborate. Where after serving on the board in various capacities, he was president in 2000, 2001. Then he moved to district level, and he was district governor for our District 9500 in 2010, 2011, which is the same year that I was president, so I got to know him well and respect him greatly. Ed is the chair of the Rotary Foundation for our district, and he'll talk to us about the work of the Rotary Foundation, and he will be assisted in that during the exercise by past President Bryan Harris and myself. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ed King.
Thanks very much indeed, Tony. President Frank, members of the Rotary Club of Adelaide, and hopefully that can come up, and friends of Rotary. Just to set one record straight, I'm not one of those few people who put their hands up. I actually did change jobs a number of times during my career. The most significant was to stay in Adelaide rather than be transferred back to Melbourne with the mob who I came here with. So, but anyway, thank you. But it is good to be back here at Adelaide, and it's also good to be amongst Rotarians, because Rotarians, we sort of operate under this mantra of service above self, and service is very important to us. And those principles of service do motivate us. And we sort of want to make our world, whatever that might be, a better place. And as a result of that, we support a number of causes, a number of really, really worthy causes. But sometimes we have just a slight bit of amnesia, and we forget about our own cause, and that is Rotary's own charity, the Rotary Foundation. It is Rotary's only charity that it is totally encompassed within Rotary. There are a lot of other worthy causes associated with Rotary, but the Foundation is the sole one that operates throughout this vast network that we all belong to. So I was saying, why do we have this little bit of amnesia about Rotary Foundation? Maybe we feel we give enough to Rotary in turning up once a week for our meal and the good fellowship that goes with that, and also the work that we do naturally through the various projects and things that come up. And that is all very honourable. But I'd just like to let you know what the mission of the Rotary Foundation is, and that is to enable Rotarians, that's us, to advance world understanding, goodwill and peace through the improvement of health, the support of education and the alleviation of poverty. And the Rotary Foundation helps fund these humanitarian activities, from local service projects to global initiatives. So the Rotary Foundation is funding projects right here in Adelaide, as well as across this broad world of ours. Now, there are various types of grants. There's the smaller little grants that are your district grants, which are totally controlled here in Adelaide. And they're the larger global grants, which I think Tony's going to touch on very briefly, which are the ones that for over $30,000, which Rotary clubs can really get their teeth into. The Foundation also leads the charge, as we all know, on campaigns such as the eradication of polio. If I could just have an aside, and thank you so much to the Rotary Club of Adelaide, members who attended the fundraising movie the other day. We raised just on $4,000, so we're really, really happy with that showing. And Rotarians and Friends of Rotarians support the Foundation through their voluntary contributions. So why do we say please support the Foundation? I guess because we can say it stacks up. There's a plethora of charities out there, and I'm not going to bag any one of them, but a lot of them, when you give your money to it, you know where it ends up. Probably not. Do you know what percentage is being taken over to run that particular charity? Probably not. An organisation such as the Rotary Club of Adelaide, I'm sure, does its homework very well before it does commit to any particular charity. But the Rotary Foundation does actually stack up. For a start, it has stellar charity ratings. Last year, the Rotary Foundation earned a grade of A+ from the American Institute of Philanthropy. Another one called Charity Navigator states that they exceed the industry standards and outperform most charities in its cause. And an organisation called the Better Business Bureau Wise Giving Alliance, I'm surprised our American cousins haven't come up with an acronym for that yet, states that Rotary meets the 20 standards for charity accountability. And they evaluate charities in categories such as governance, effectiveness, finances, fundraising, and privacy policy. So every dollar that the Rotary Foundation gets is spent within the Rotary family. Not on the Rotary family, but within it. On projects that have been initiated from when somebody within a club said, why don't we, or why can't we? We, in the Rotary Foundation, do pride ourselves on the governance, or as our American cousins call it, stewardship, in that we are able to account for every cent that is spent. Now that might appear, when you get down into the nitty-gritty of managing an individual grant, to be a bit over the top, but it is the disciplines that are in place to ensure that no money goes astray. In former times, we did have instances where somebody in an unnamed third world country had a well drilled for them on with Rotary funds, and ended up selling the water to his villages. Those sort of things happen. Also things like somebody said in a club, I've just been to Vanuatu, went to an island, the school's got absolutely nothing in it. They sit on the ground, they haven't got blackboards, chalk, nothing. So somebody said, well, let's really help them out, and got a whole lot of computers, they sent them over there, only to find out that there's no electricity on that particular island. So this is all the sort of checks and balances and controls that are safeguarding the projects funded by the Rotary Foundation. But again, the Rotary Foundation can't be all things to all people. So it has 6 basic areas of focus, and which any project that is funded by the foundation, it has to fall under one of these 6, and that's peace and conflict resolution, and the major involvement there is with the involvement of peace scholarships, disease prevention and treatment, water and sanitation, maternal and child health, basic education and literacy, and economic and community development. If you think about those 6, they probably cover the areas most needed in needed communities. The importance is that we have to ensure that we don't send computers to areas that have no electricity. So part of an application for a grant is that the community needs have been identified, that there is local support evident. There's nothing worse than people sitting in the first world and saying, these poor people over in the third world, they really need X, Y, or Z. The reality is, if they're not going to support what is going to be done for them, it won't happen. The project has to be sustainable. It's got to be some sort of measurability about it, and it's got to have active Rotary involvement, preferably at both ends. So that in a nutshell is what we're trying to do and to achieve. And last year it was about $215 million went through the foundation. Admittedly, about 45% of that went to the polio eradication campaign. Every one of those dollars would have come from a Rotary Club or individual Rotarians or kind supporters. The one thing about money that comes from Rotary Clubs is it does actually come back to districts, some of it, and enables the clubs in the districts or the district itself to entertain and undergo a project of their own choosing. So that's a brief overview. It would be far remiss of me to carry on any further, but next is Past President Tony, who is going to tell you about one that you're involved in. Is that right?
Thanks, Ed. I'm going to tell you about more than one that we're involved in. Ed has given you the big picture on what the Rotary Foundation is about around the world. I'm going to give you the picture of what our club is doing now, this year, to support the Rotary Foundation. Firstly, Paul Harris Fellows. In our club, Paul Harris Fellows are a way of recognising service by an individual Rotarian above and beyond the normal call of duty. Paul Harris Fellows are awarded and paid for by the club with a donation of $1,000 to the Rotary Foundation for every Paul Harris Fellow the club awards. Any Rotarian who gives $1,000 to the Rotary Foundation is made a Paul Harris Fellow. So if there's 5 or 6 of you that want to donate $1,000 each, you will automatically become a Paul Harris Fellow. It is not only a club that can make you a Paul Harris Fellow. Similarly, Paul Harris Fellows don't have to be awarded, I've said, by the club. Our club usually gives between 5 and 8 Paul Harris Fellow awards a year. So for the Paul Harris Fellow entity, we're giving between $5,000 and $8,000 a year to the Rotary Foundation. That's the first way we're doing it. Secondly, the Centurion Club that many of you would have seen mentioned on your invoices that Sylvia sends out, the half-yearly sub invoice. The Centurion is a very convenient and personal and easy way to support the humanitarian work of the Rotary Foundation. And it's there to eradicate poverty, educate the illiterate and relieve disease. All it takes is each Rotarian to donate $100 a year to become a member of the Centurion Club. Now we make that easy in this club by enabling you to pay $50 each time you pay your subs. So far, these contributions are paid into the Australian Rotary Foundation Trust, so all the money stays in Australia, and are tax deductible. We have 38 Centurions in this club at last count. We've had the exercise running for about 18 months now, and we had an initial burst. But guys, $50 every 6 months to help get every member of this club to be a Centurion is not very much to ask. The theme initials for this exercise is EREY, every Rotarian, every year, $100. That's the second thing we're promoting. In addition to that, there are financial grants that come from the districts. Our district, for example, District 950, has quite a deal of scope in providing money to support projects that we identify. The decisions on what the projects are and the decisions on funding are administered by our district alone. They don't have to go to Sydney, they don't have to go to Cleveland or wherever it is in the States, all right? It's controlled from here. Most of the district financial grants are for projects of less than $30,000 a year, or less than $30,000 total project cost, all right? Some of the big grants that Ed was talking about, the global grants, they go into millions per year. You've just got to look at the Polio Plus one. I read where in a particular year there's hundreds of millions of dollars going into trying to rid the world of polio finally. It's a hard game, but that's what that's about. Now, Bryan Harris will speak to us more about a particular project that we are working on now. It's one that he'll elaborate on. Another method of supporting the grants, the TRF, is global grants. Now these are minimum of $30,000 and they're centred on 6 areas of focus in the world. And Ed has read them out: peace and conflict, disease prevention, etc. I won't go over that. Our club, this club, the Rotary Club Adelaide, is currently engaged in the Parago project. The Parago is a little town on the Sepik River in the far north of Papua New Guinea. Its first objective, this project, it's in its early days, is to provide clean drinking water for the native inhabitants and thus reduce the infant mortality rate, which is huge. The project is led by one of our new Rotarians, Paul Greenaway, OAM. Are you here today, Paul? You're not here? He's probably out getting more drinking straws. That's okay. Okay, he's leading it, and it's supported by our RCA board member, Giuliano Rec. They've already done some fundraising. This project has huge potential in the millions of dollars, huge potential for good and for significant funding by the Rotary Foundation, as the project is in the very early stages. It goes beyond just water, it goes into disease prevention, water sanitation, maternal and child care, all sorts of things. Just the sort of thing the Rotary Foundation internationally would like to pick up and run with. Next, and this is one that we're all aware of, but who's heard of Vocational Training Teams? Put up your hands if you've heard of vocational training teams. Okay, a few of you have, that's great. I'm going to tell you what they are because they're here. Vocational training teams provide the opportunity for young professionals from varying countries around the world to go to another country in the world for a period of 6, 8, 10 weeks to learn leadership skills, develop their leadership skills, and learn from other countries what they can bring back to Australia. Last year we had a team of 5 Filipino education professionals who came here. Many of us met and heard them speak. I did. Very impressive young team. One was into IT and in a big university she was in. It's a great way for young professional people, you know, up to maybe 40 years of age, to get out and be paid for by Rotary, to be looked after by Rotary in another country. This year in Australia, we're sending a team of young agricultural professionals from Australia, and they're from our district, and I think combining with 1 or 2 other districts, not from the whole of Australia, just a small group of districts, and we're sending them to South Africa. You know, they're agriculture, they could be winemakers, all sorts of things. A lot of them come from probably Maitland and places around like that, and they're going to teach, but they're also going to learn from the South Africans things that we can apply back here in Australia. An enormous personal growth experience that youth people can get at an early age in their careers so they can grow into senior, responsible specialists in their field, whatever it is. It's so easy for Rotary to do that. These projects in our club are led by past President Brett McMurtry and by Rotarian Darcy Walsh. His work is in this area and he does it excellently. That's all I've got to say. I'd like Bryan Harris to tell you now, coming down from the macro to the few that we do, to 1 or 2 particular projects that he is heavily involved in, to tell you what we're doing. Thanks, Bryan.
So I'm going to outline to you how District Grant is helping this club's homeless youth project, how collaboration and partnerships with other clubs and organisations are also leveraging the work of the club in this area, and mention that there are other possibilities where we can apply this District Grant and actually global grant monies. In 2012, this club began collaboration with organisations in the city involved in homeless youth. We assisted one of those organisations, Multicultural Youth SA, I'll call them MISA for short, with financial support to accommodate unaccompanied male minors, young Afghani men, as they began their new lives in Australia. The club also established a PhD scholarship at this time to undertake a longitudinal study tracking the interventions by homeless youth organisations to assess what actions were effective, what could be improved, as a basis for improving policy and developing best practice. The scholarship has just commenced. It's a partnership of the club, Australian Rotary Health and the University of Adelaide, which effectively enables the club to leverage its investment by a factor of about 3. Our involvement with MISA has continued since then, basically assisting them to move the household effects of their clients to new accommodation from time to time, and sometimes assisting in sourcing basic household items. At the beginning of this Rotary year, President Frank proposed that we apply for a district grant to support this work. We were successful in obtaining $4,600 from district as a district grant, which we match dollar for dollar. I should point out that MISA runs on the smell of an oily rag, as it were. It has very little to spend for meeting the needs of its clients. So the grant funds are used to provide emergency food supplies and emergency supplies for young mothers, for example, to purchase basic furniture and simple household items, and to cover transportation costs as we move things across town, such as taxi trucks. The Rotary Club of Adelaide Light has subsequently joined us with $600 and the supply of second-hand beds through one of their members, who is the franchisee of Captain Snooze at the Mile End Homemakers Centre. Also, Rotary Club of Adelaide South has joined with a contribution of $400. So we have now a collaboration with 2 other clubs as well. The project's very active, At the present time, we're moving either a bed or some other household items at least once a week. So the district grant is helping the club support homeless youth financially by a factor of 2, and the collaboration of the 2 other city clubs in the project has been most welcome. Tony mentioned global grants briefly, the Parago project in Papua New Guinea, which this club is progressing. I can give you an example of how global grants might work, and it's really quite an eye-opener. A theoretical international project with a cost of $30,000 might be funded by contributions of $7,500 from the club, which would be matched by $7,500 by the district as a district grant. The balance, the $15,000, would be supplied by the Rotary Foundation. So this is an example perhaps where in the future we could look for additional support. And here is the number of it all. Grants from the district or global grants from the Rotary Foundation come from the funds that we contribute to the Rotary Foundation. If clubs don't contribute, there will be little to allocate and little to fund the other great Rotary projects such as the polio program. We all need to contribute, and there are many ways of doing it, and Tony has outlined those to you today. Finally, in regard to the homeless youth project in particular, Tony Robins and I, together with a couple of Adelaide Light members, are the principal bodies doing the work. I invite anybody with a few spare hours now and then, just every week or so, or now and then, depending on what your availability is, to join in and help us on this project. You would be most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Rotarians, for listening. We just have a couple of minutes. Is anybody any question or any comment?
Tony?
Yes, Steve.
Tony, thanks, and Brian. I think it said it was the only Rotary charity. Where does the Rotary Health Foundation research Foundation come
I tried to emphasise the only one that covers the entire world of Rotary. The Australian Rotary Health is very much an Australian organisation, so it doesn't extend and do work in India or anywhere else. So I was just trying to make that thing. It is still recognised by Rotary, it's within the Rotary family, but it's not a worldwide one, that's all.
Thanks very much, thanks.
Good. Thanks, Pete. Anyone else? Done? Done? All done. Thank you, everybody, for speaking. Please give them a round of applause for waking us all up.